I'm building the fastest $1,000 gaming PC possible with an Nvidia RTX 5070. A build that only just became possible thanks to recent price drops on the RTX 50 series, bringing the GPUs down to or even below their original MSRP. Prior to that, the fastest current gen cards you could realistically squeeze into a $1,000 build were an RTX 5060 Ti or an AMD Radeon RX 9060 XT. The RTX 5070 is up to 30% faster than those cards, and in most cases can even handle 4K with the right settings, which we'll test later. But even with these prices reaching an all-time low, squeezing a 5070 into a $1,000 budget means making some serious sacrifices elsewhere. So that raises the big questions I'm tackling today. What kind of trade-offs come with such a build? And where do you draw the line when chasing maximum FPS on a fixed budget?
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should.
Now before we continue, special thanks to Wolfbox for sponsoring today's video. As much as I love my car, our relationship hasn't always been rosy, and on several occasions I've gone to start her up only to be met with no signs of life. That's why starting today I'll be keeping this thing in my car 24/7. This is the Wolfbox MegaVolt24 Jump Starter. It has 4,000 amps of peak power to instantly revive a dead car with no wait time, and it has enough charge to perform dozens of jump starts before needing to be topped off. A full charge takes less than an hour since the unit supports 65-watt USB-C fast charging. Not to mention it's suitable for 10-liter 12-volt vehicles, so it'll jump cars, trucks, and boats no problem. There's USB Type A and C ports for fast charging other electronic devices too, which really extends its usefulness. I've had my car battery die at night once or twice, so the built-in LED is icing on the cake. Wolfbox also sent me their G900Pro mirror dash cam, which has a 4K front camera and a 2.5K at the rear, both of which can clearly capture license plates and surrounding details, even in low or backlit lighting conditions. The app lets you easily download footage to your phone at any time, and voice control lets you manage basic functions since you're, driving. I like how large the 12-inch touchscreen is and how it just looks like a regular mirror. It's super discreet, and for total peace of mind, there's even a 24-hour parking mode that catches everything while you're away from your vehicle. If I didn't already have a dash cam in my car, I would definitely mount this up. It has a ton of positive reviews on Amazon, which sounds to me like a green light. To check out availability and pricing for the dash cam or the jump starter, I'll drop some links in the description. Thanks again to Wolfbox for sponsoring this one. Now back to the main video. A quick disclaimer before we get started, I do not recommend anyone build this exact PC. In fact, in most cases, I'd advise against it. Now, I've done my best to keep things as balanced as possible within the constraints I set for this challenge, but this isn't meant to be a build guide. It's a performance experiment, an attempt to build the fastest gaming PC possible for $1,000 following Nvidia's recent price drop. So yeah, some of the parts I used are gonna raise a few eyebrows, but keep in mind, they're not recommendations, they're here to serve the narrative of the video. At the end of the day, everyone will have their own take on what a $1,000 build should look like in late 2025. This is just one of the more extreme examples, meant to spark a discussion around performance versus compromise. So with that said, let's take a look at the parts. Let's start with the GPU, since I already teased that to you earlier. This is the PNY RTX 5070. I got this for $540 on Amazon. I got all these products on Amazon, but $540, that's just slightly below MSRP for the 5070, which makes it a much better value than it's ever been. Since it launched, I mean, it was going for what, $650, even upwards of $700 plus when it first came out, and now a much better value. But it's a pretty straightforward card. It doesn't have a ton of bells and whistles. However, it does feature a triple fan cooler and a backplate, and it is an OC model, so it does come factory overclocked. Now, some of you might be wondering why I didn't go with an AMD Radeon RX 9070, the non-XT card, because they're fairly comparable in a lot of ways. But right now, the 9070 is about $40 to $50 more than the 5070. And with our tight $1,000 budget today, I just couldn't justify making those cuts on all the other components to squeeze that 9070 in there, because the 9070 on average does have faster rasterized performance than the 5070. It has more VRAM, 16 gigs instead of 12. Are there certain scenarios where you will be bottlenecked by 12 gigs of VRAM if you're gaming, let's say at 4K, or have path tracing on and crank up all the settings? Absolutely. Are there ways to mitigate that or even eliminate it by tweaking the settings to make things more comfortable? Absolutely. So again, it just kind of depends on what your needs as a user are. But ultimately, budget was a constraint for this video. So I went with the 5070. The CPU, I didn't want to pair, I said I wanted to make this as balanced as possible as I could. So we actually did manage to squeeze an AMD Ryzen 7600X in here, 6 cores, 12 threads. This is on AM5. It's not the latest and greatest 9000 series, but 7000 series is still super solid in 2015, geez. But you know, this actually gets us out of the AM4 platform, because if you look at a lot of pre-builts right now on Amazon, Newegg, Walmart, for $1,000, a pre-built gets you generally, a lot of them have, on the AMD side, a 5700X, which is fine. It's perfectly fine CPU, still games like a champ, but it's an older platform now. It's starting to show some age. It's DDR4, it's Gen 4, and there's a limited upgrade path compared to AM5, which AMD is supporting for the next few years at the very least. Great CPU, and it's even a touch faster, even in multi-core scenarios, than the 5700X, despite having fewer cores and threads, just because it's got that newer architecture. This was $165. I mean, I think there was a recent price drop, but $165, absolute steal for that chip. The motherboard, maybe not so much of a steal, but this is what we could afford. A B650M M.2 Plus from ASRock. This board is a little confusing to me. It's got, I've noticed a theme with it, which is boo. Okay, I'll show you what I mean. It only has 2 DIMM slots. Boo! But it supports dual channel. Okay. It completely lacks any M.2 heatsink or cover plate. Boo! But it supports Gen 5. Okay. It doesn't have built-in Wi-Fi. Boo! But it does have an M.2 Wi-Fi slot and cutouts in the I/O shield for antennas. Okay. It doesn't all cancel out though. It is a super budget board, so we don't have things like front panel USB-C, and it only has one Type-C on the back. Actually, I'm kind of surprised it even has that. It's a 6+1+1 power phase, which is totally fine for our 7600X, but if we were to upgrade a couple generations down the line to like a flagship CPU, something with a lot of cores that draws a lot of power, then this might be a limiting factor. Despite our tight budget, I did manage to get a dual channel kit of 32 gigs DDR5 6000 speed memory from Crucial. This is their Pro series. I'm happy that we didn't have to resort to, you know, some knockoff Chinese brand, but I'm gonna eat my words right now, because for the SSD, we got a king spec 512 gig 2.5-inch SATA drive, which is perfectly fine if you're just gaming, you're not really doing any kind of content creation, workstation, professional stuff, but it just feels dated in 2025, especially because NVMe M.2 drives are not that expensive, but we were just working with very little budget after we picked out the GPU. By the way, the 5070, I should have mentioned this, at $540, that's 54% of our budget, of our $1,000 budget, went to the GPU. I've seen people go as low as 30%, 40%, pretty common, but 54% is fine if you have $2,000, because you have roughly $1,000 left for all the other components. But with this, after we bought this, you know, I had, what, $460 left, and that's for everything else. So, yeah, prepare to be disappointed for the rest of these components. The power supply, this is a rough one as well. The Thermaltake Smart 600 watt unit. It's 80 plus, but just 80 plus, not bronze. It didn't place. It didn't place in the PSU Olympics, which means it's got 80% efficiency at 20, 50, 100% load. I think it's gonna be fine because it's gonna be enough for the 250 watt pull from the GPU, the max 150 watt pull from the CPU, and leftover for everything else. It's just not the greatest. It doesn't allow for any kind of future proofing. It's not modular. It's what we could afford to make this build happen. The cooler is actually not too shabby, thanks to our friends at Thermalright. This is the Assassin X 120 Refined SE. I haven't used this cooler before, but it's just one of those really good value coolers that has a bajillion positive reviews. It does have a 120 millimeter fan. Oftentimes when you're dealing with coolers at this price point, sometimes you get an 80 millimeter fan. And then finally, for our case, drum roll please. This is the case. It's not a case at all. It is a test bench. It's just a piece of metal to screw things down to. This is what we could afford. We had, after everything else, I had about $17 left, and this was 17 bucks. So, this is what I'm talking about. These are the sacrifices that were made to get this card in a $1,000 PC. But why don't I go ahead and put this all together.
Look at this thing. Look at this thing that I just put together. You look at it and you go, isn't this the most glorious gaming PC you've ever seen? It is. It absolutely is. But I promise you, there are some shortcomings. For example, 500 gigs of storage is just not enough for a gaming PC these days. I installed 4 games on here. Granted, 3 of them were AAA or whatever, but 4 games, we barely have any storage left. We have less than 100 gigs to go. That's really not great. The power supply is okay for now. I mean, at max, we're drawing 495 watts from the wall. That gives us over 100 watts of overhead still, but it really doesn't give us much headroom for upgrades. If we want to swap out the CPU or GPU down the line, we're pretty much capped at 600 watts. We'd have to upgrade the PSU as well, so that's a thing. And then we've got the case, or lack thereof, just this test bench. I will say, I'm glad that this test bench did come with this little power button. Definitely beats having to use a screwdriver to short the pins anytime I want to turn it on. But apart from that, it doesn't have any protection, no physical protection from, fingers getting nicked on fans or spaghetti sauce being dumped into the parts. Yeah, it's happened before, people. That's probably the biggest issue I see of not having a case for this system, because I could care less about the sound. I mean, the fans, the GPU fans, they are audible when it's under load, but they're not too bad, and if you have game audio, it's kind of a non-issue. And then no path of airflow. There's no case fans, obviously, so temperatures are maybe not as good as they could be, but they're still totally fine. Max of 69C on the CPU, max of 68 on the RTX 5070, so we're really looking good there. So yeah, in some areas there are some heavy compromises for sure, but the flip side of this is that this is a very fast gaming PC. I mean, the 5070 plus the 7600X, this thing flies, brother. I ran 3 different games, all of which were AAA titles: Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Doom: The Dark Ages. They all happen to support DLSS as well. DLSS upscaling is just a super common feature on a lot of titles these days, so I enabled that, set it to quality for all those runs. I did not, however, use any frame generation. Didn't use 2x, 3x, 4x, didn't use MFG whatsoever, just because it's not available on nearly as many titles as DLSS upscaling. So just to keep things relevant, I did it that way. But the results were spectacular. 4K, I was getting over 60 FPS in all 3 titles, if not a lot more than 60, getting 80 and sometimes 90 FPS in some of the games. 1440p, over 100 FPS in all titles, and 1080p was anywhere between 100 and 200 frames per second. I didn't turn on ray tracing for any of the games here that support it, though you could enable that and run comfortably at 1080, 1440, even 4K in some instances by just tweaking the settings around. This is a very fast gaming PC, no matter how you cut it. But for $1,000, it's kind of a value beast. I mean, the frames per dollar that we're getting out of this thing just wasn't possible before the price drops of the Nvidia RTX 50 series GPUs. That being said, we did have to make some serious sacrifices in other areas, which begs the question, was it all worth it?
Like I mentioned earlier, the parts in this build that I think are holding us back the most are the motherboard, SSD, power supply, and if you can call it that, the case. Now, if we bumped up the budget by just $100 or so, we could swap all of those for better options that would significantly improve the overall experience and make future upgrades much easier. But of course, that kind of defeats the whole point of this challenge, which begs the question. If you had exactly $1,000 to spend, would you go with a build similar to this, with all its speed and compromises, or would you settle for a much slower GPU like the 5060 Ti or 9060 XT and use the leftover budget to create a more balanced, well-rounded system? It's a tough call. And to be honest, this isn't a super realistic scenario, since most people work within a budget range rather than a hard cap. But if we're entertaining the idea, I think there's a strong case to be made for either side. The RTX 5070 build here makes sense if you're simply chasing the most frames possible. Despite its weaknesses, none of them really impact the in-game experience, and after its price drop, the 5070 now packs the kind of value it should have offered since day one. Plus, if you're patient, you can always upgrade the weaker parts over time as more budget becomes available. On the flip side, performance isn't everything. There's a lot to be said for a well-rounded system, one that gives you peace of mind, works reliably, and honestly, probably looks better too. Using balanced hardware up front means you're not scrambling to replace half your PC the moment you finish it, and when it's time to upgrade your CPU or GPU down the line, you're starting from a much stronger foundation. I think it could really go either way, and so I'm curious where you guys stand on this. Was this $1,000 well spent, or far from it? If you gave someone $1,000, let's put it this way, if you gave someone $1,000 to build you a gaming PC and they came back with this, would you shake their hand with gratitude or punch them in the face? Very curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Let me know down below in the comments, but that is going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for more content coming very soon, and I will see y'all in the next video.